All right, welcome back. Just to remind you where we're at, in the prior video, we created a character. So we threw away our pawn and we created a character. We got it moving around, twisting and turning, and jumping, and it collides with the walls. So we kind of have the basis, little framework for our game here. And so I thought about what would be a good logical next step. I mean, one thing I was struggling with was, do we jump and create a user interface right away, which is something I like to do quite early on, especially before you start to play test with other people. But I thought maybe it's a little bit too early to show you some of the UI features, and especially since we haven't really talked about the basic class, which is an actor. So in this particular video, what I want to accomplish is I want us to make an actor. That's going to be a blueprint. And this actor is going to represent our pickup, which in the case of my game, it's a taco, right? But we're not going to make the taco. We're just going to make an actor that can be picked up by the player. Although be picked up is not exactly something that we're going to deal with. We're just going to see, like, does it disappear when we collide with it? And this is going to be a pretty good introduction to how to communicate between actors and between blueprints in Unreal Engine, because it's something we're going to use quite a lot, especially as we develop some more complex game mechanics and things. So again, in our content folder, I made this blueprints one. Let's keep things kind of clean. So I'm actually going to delete my input pawn. So select that, choose delete. You'll get this warning, right? Some of the assets are still being referenced in memory. That's because, because we need to maybe clean up redirects. So I'm going to right click on content, fix up redirectors in folder. Maybe that won't work. Yeah, it's still complaining. It has these 3 references in memory. That's okay. We can force delete. Always just pay attention when you see this and make sure you don't see any direct referencers here. Because if it said asset referencers and it had a name of a thing, then that might be very bad, because you'll break your game. Especially if that requires, if it requires some kind of reference. So force delete is fine, and then I'm going to right click on my blueprints folder because it is empty, and I'm going to delete that too and choose to delete. Great, just kind of keeping things clean. So let's right click here, new folder, and since I kind of know these will be like the pickups, I could just make one called actors, but since we're keeping it simple, I can choose pickups. We may end up having more than one, but I think we'll generally have one. Okay, so when you're in there, let's right click, blueprint class, and we're going to make an actor. So an actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in the world. So that's very, very generic. And so before we make that, let me just try out my Microsoft Paint skills here. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I think most people do, but just to talk a little bit about actors. So right now we actually do have an actor, and that's our player, right? Our player character. It's really just character, right? Which is a pawn. And a pawn is an actor that can be possessed. So we kind of have at the top level, you're an actor, but you're also a pawn, which we made in the very, second video. We just deleted. But you're inheriting like more stuff from the pawn, and you're a character. Right? So that's our player. And actually, like, it's more like that right now. So okay, so that's kind of what we have for the player. Now we want to make a pickup, right? So we don't need a pawn. It's our pickup's not being possessed. It doesn't get any input from a controller or anything. So we want to make an actor. So this will be our pickup here. So really all we need is we need it to be an actor, which is the top level class here. So these are the classes. These guys here are classes. And we just want the actor. And many things can be actors in Unreal Engine. Almost anything that needs to take some kind of, that needs to perform some interactivity or have some input or move around, or almost so many things are actors, right? And every blueprint is essentially, well, not every blueprint, but most are some kind of actor, things that are placed in your world. Like, you can have, an enemy. Obviously you would have an enemy would be an actor of type pawn, controlled by an AI character or something, or maybe another player. You could have, you could have a door be an actor, right? And that actor itself could have, one mesh here for the door, and then maybe another mesh for the frame. And then it could have some blueprint that was associated with it that, when a player collided with some, little collision box that might be around it, then it could fire off, an event in the blueprint, right, that we've seen before to, open door. Right, some sort of interactivity. And that would also be an actor. Okay, so I think that's enough Microsoft painting for now. So anyway, so what we're going to do is make an actor. So if you choose actor, it's a blueprint. So we're going to have BP underscore taco. Okay, so this will be our pickup. And you guessed it, we want to open this. And I'd like to have some sort of representation. So I'm going to go ahead and instead of just choosing a cube, I'd like to get us in the habit of actually adding a component that will end up replacing what it references, but in this case we want a mesh, and this mesh would be a static mesh. Okay, and we can name it taco, so we don't call it static mesh. It's still empty. So on the right hand side here in the details, we want to basically assign a static mesh to it. And because we have some starter content, we have things that are a little more interesting than like background cube. That's pretty cool. Sorry, I undid it. Or like editor sphere or cube one. I think all the editor stuff or the starter content stuff has a material, and we'll cover materials and things later. If you're like, Christian, this is boring, what we're really doing is all the functionality, gameplay mechanics, systems, all that stuff that gets us to be able to test things early on very quickly, and then you're going to have more than enough time to, let your creativity flow, make, materials and sounds and music and all that good stuff. But anyway, for now, let's choose cube, type cube. A lot of cubes. I'm going to choose shape cube because it has this white material associated with it. And then I'm going to compile. Again, dock it up here and bring it into the world. It's kind of large. So because it's so big, we can choose to, in general, I keep the default scene root scale of 1, 1, 1, which means it's scaled 1 to 1. And then we can, shrink the taco to 0.5. So I'm going to change its scale here in the transform to 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. You can also click this little lock icon, which will lock the values so it's always relative. So it will scale uniformly. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here and okay, that seems fine. I mean, it's not. I'm very tempted to make a material because it's going to make me happy. Okay, let's do that. We're going to make a quick material. We cover these things later, but I think it's just helpful because we're making programmer art. Not everything can be white. So if you right-click on the content folder, let's make a new folder called materials. So I'll go into detail in terms of a material in Unreal Engine. It's not a texture. It can have textures inside of it. Just it's what you see. It's what gets rendered. And there are also there's a node-based system for materials too. So it's going to look a lot like blueprints, but they're not blueprints. They're materials. So go ahead and right-click inside of that and choose material. And then in terms of naming convention, I use an M and then underscore. And I kind of want this to just be a color. So I'm going to choose M_red. And then double click to open the material editor. And you see something kind of looks like the blueprint editor, but it's not. And so this first node, well, it's really the last node. This is the output. So you feed things into the output. Feed things meaning you can feed lots of like code, and you can, well, not code, you feed like this similar type of visual scripting into the outputs here. And so for example, base color is what I'm interested in. I'm interested in base color. I want to change the color. So if I right click on this, I like to promote these to parameters, meaning it's like promoting it to a variable, something you can change. So promote to parameter, and it gives this parameter named base color. And then on the left here, we see the default value of that. I can also just double click here and select something. So you should be familiar with this. It's a color wheel. And I'm going to choose, I don't know, there, like that color. And great. And then press OK. And then you want to apply it. And it takes a second, depending on the speed of your computer. It will compile that. And there are lots of other things you can select. This is a physically based rendering shader or material. If you're like, what does that mean? Don't worry, we'll cover it later. But for now, just kind of keep it like that. And that's what I've done. So I've made a material, and it's not even red, it's pink. So I'm going to save it, close it. I'm renaming this to pink. It's not red, but I like it. Okay. Okay, so I made a material, and all you can do, you can actually just drag and drop, I believe. Well, no, you can't do it directly on actors. You can do it on geometry like this. You'll notice it says shaders compiling, but I just dragged and dropped it onto that wall. And that looks pretty cool. Okay, focus. All right. Right, but we want to assign that. So if we go back into our actor and we have our taco mesh selected, we can change the material here. So if you look on the right hand side, it says M_basic wall. We just made a material. It was M_pink. And select that and compile it. And now it's assigned it to that material, to that mesh. It just gives us something that looks a little more, I don't know, more interesting. It's not all just white and boring. And I pressed play and I'm moving around. Right, so what's our goal here? So we actually have an actor here called BP_taco. And it has a mesh, but it's not doing anything. So in the event graph, we really aren't doing anything. So what do we kind of want to, what do we think we want to do? I mean, the end goal, or at least one of the milestones that we want to hit pretty early on, is someone else should play this, like someone that's not you. Or, so you hand a controller to a friend, or you give them the keyboard and you say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Go forth and do that. So it's not only about like when we collide with this, it should disappear. I think we want to add something that's kind of giving the player like a sense of, oh, I should go for this. And that's where we can use, I'm back in here in the event graph, that's where we can use things like the event tick. Specifically what I'm thinking about here is I want to just do a simple like procedural movement. And that procedural movement is, I feel like it should just rotate. Like that kind of rotation is a little weird. Let's go back in here and just make sure in our viewport. Is everything okay? Yeah, everything is fine. So I kind of think I might want to, that's weird. Okay, maybe it just rotates like this around its Z axis. We've seen this before. We actually saw this when we made our first pawn, when we wanted to we wanted to rotate, right? We wanted to get the rotation. So we have seen it. So in event tick, what we want to do is drag off this, and let's do rotation. I'm just typing rotation. And we've seen transformation, add actor, local rotation, no. Set, add, we need add actor. Oh, right, that's actually what we want. Sorry, local rotation. And then delta rotator. So I could be kind of simple and just do that. And then in that case, well, let's see what's going to happen, right? Yes. Okay. I could do that. That does it. It might be interesting to you if you thought it was, well, this may be overkill, but we could promote this to a variable, right? So let's do it. Promote to variable. Let's call it rotation. Let's see, rotation vector. And then that's going to take that as a default. Let's expose that. Not that we necessarily need to, but what I'm interested in doing is showing you a different mode. So to date, I've been just playing this in the active viewport, which is here. But there's some other, if we click this drop down, there's some other options, right? So I don't have my VR headset hooked up, but I could play it in VR if I really wanted to. And then the camera that we have would be taken over by the player. So if you're like, wow, that's super cool, it is. Like, in fact, if you set the camera in the right place, you could put somebody in VR, give them a controller, and let them play this game. Kind of, it's very meta, but you know, you could have the whole environment around them and things, and they're here, like controlling this character. But what I wanted to show you is the simulation. So if we choose simulate, that is, let's see. I don't think we can actually control the character when we're in simulation mode, but we can, you know, it's basically simulating the world. And if you look here, I've selected this, this blueprint, and you can see it's adding that every frame is adding 1 to our Z value, and just kind of looping around and making a circle. But we also have now, we're in simulation mode, we also have the ability to change this Z value. Oh, by the way, if I did possess, I could, possess this particular pawn, if I wanted to do that, which I don't, because then I lose my mouse, right? So, oh, and keep in mind, when you select one of these, that's going to be the default when you go up to press it. So if you wanted to change it back, you would just press the down button and then go ahead. But let's start simulating again and choose this this blueprint. So what this is helpful for us is, like, why do you want to expose this variable and make it public, is because now we can kind of test, like, if we don't like that, we can just change it and make it 2. And that's maybe too fast. So we say 1.5 and we get a feel for it. Maybe we want to see what happens if we add y to it and push 1, and that kind of looks kind of strange. 1.5, weird. 0. What about x? Doesn't feel like a spinning taco to me, but the point remains that you can still kind of update this. So, right, and keep in mind that also I should resimulate, because I've rotated off all these here. So now if I play that, I do 1.2. I like 1.2. Okay, so that's just what it's going to be. And I'll go back to my blueprint. I'll set the default value to 1.2, compile. Okay, nice. That kind of at least tells us, at least it tells me that there's something, there's something quite interesting about this, and I should try to get it. I can't, I can't, but pretty soon. So let's go back to our blueprint here, and we're in the event graph. And you notice I didn't just immediately delete some of these. I'll delete this one because we don't need it. But this one, event actor begin overlap. And so this is one of the events, one of the functions that can be called on an actor when another actor overlaps. Right? That's actor begin overlap. And so remember, as I said in here, right? Our character is an actor, and almost anything is an actor at a high level. So we should, and what we're interested in is just knowing, hey, did we overlap this? Has something happened? Have we overlapped it? And we want to show a message, right? And then we can deal with what happens later, like increasing the score, making the player, larger, slowing them down, blah, blah, blah. But let's kind of start baby steps. So the babyest step we can take is to print a string and, not say hello, but say I was overlapped. Okay, very simple. Now if we play here, we don't get a message. So we expect we would see some kind of console message. And if you double click the tilde key, you would see it. I mean, sometimes it may not show up in your viewport, but if you double click the console like this, you should see it. So we see nothing. Why? If you're like, well, we shouldn't. We shouldn't at this point. But if we go ahead and we look at our player character here, it has this capsule component, and this is a collision component, right? And this is what can help say, well, you collide with something, right? And it can also register hit events, and that's what's allowing us. This capsule component, by the way, if you recall back when we had our earlier input pawn, we were able to clip through the walls. And that's because there was no capsule component on our input pawn. But now that we have a capsule component here on our character, we can't go past these walls. The physics engine is saying you're colliding, right? And we want, in this case, for our taco actor here, we also want to register that event, right? That in this case, it's an overlap event. It's not it's a collision, but it's specifically an overlap. And if we look at this character, so we have this capsule collider here. And if I did something like, let's take this event actor begin overlap. If I'm in my player character, if I wanted to add event overlap begin overlap here, and I want to print out a message, let's say print I have been overlapped. Let's see what happens. Play. Wait. Yeah, nothing there either. Why is that? Let's see if we make our pawn a little bit larger. Maybe I was just a little too liberal or conservative in this sense. Radius is like 28 or something. Let's see if that works. Oh, I know. Okay. Ignore this, mainly because we're dealing with collision channels. So in order to overlap, we need two colliders that overlap each other to call that. And really, when we look at any of this stuff in the map, we don't have colliders. Like, those are specifically like these components, this capsule collider or a box collider, which we're going to make. So let's go ahead and just undo and go back to where we were at, which I think was perfect. Okay, right. So let's take this off of the character. All right, so we're going to remove this message. Okay. Sorry about that. So what we really need to do then in the case of this taco is it just has a mesh. We need a way for us to say, oh, collision presets, this might be it. Overlap all dynamic. Let's try. Yes, perfect. Okay, what did I just do? I didn't have to add a collider because the mesh itself has a collision already there, this static mesh here. But what I did have to do in order to get this message to print was what the mesh selected, you go into collision, and then you have this collision presets, right? And this data, this is set in your project data, but really don't let it overwhelm you. But you have various different presets. And first off, it says generate overlap events, and that's checked. But when I had this set to block all, which I think is the default with that, and I go to play, it's getting blocked. So it's actually not overlapping, it's blocking. So its collision preset is set to block all. Some of these other channels, they're different ones. Say like no collision, for example. What do you think would happen if we select no collision for this? Would we get an overlap message? Would we collide with it? No, we get neither. So there's no collision, and we're able to go right through the thing. That's kind of cool. Not helpful. So in terms of collision preset, overlap only pawn. That would overlap a pawn, right? In our case, we are controlling a pawn. It's a character. Spectator, pawn, block all dynamic, overlap all dynamic. So this would be any object that's dynamic. So this will work. That's why it worked when I changed this collision preset to overlap all dynamic, and then we're firing this message. So as many hundreds of hours as I've spent in the engine, I still sometimes forget this. So I think it's helpful for you to see me struggle a little bit, because this is why you want to have this print string, because if you're like, it's not working, it's generally because you did something like that I just did. So if we go back, yes, and we see we're getting this message, I was overlapped, I was overlapped, I was overlapped. Okay, and that's it there. And why do we have that? It's because we set our collision presets properly. Okay. If you're dealing with physics simulations, you can, simulate generates hit event. So there's another one called hit. There's a lot of things here that you can do, but for the most part, we now know that we were overlapped. Now, again, I could see a world where you might have, let's see if we can try out our little simulation stuff here. Let's add another cube in. I can see a world where, let's see if we're able to move our cube in simulation mode. We might need to set it as movable. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is try to show you an example of being able to check for collisions, right? So you don't want enemies that might be running through a taco to pick up that taco. You want to ignore them. And one way to do it could be through these collision channels where it's like only pawn. And that's probably the best way to do it, but it's not the best way to learn. So in this example, I'm going to drop a cube in here, which I've done, and then I want to enter simulation mode and drag that cube through this actor here and see if we still get that message, that overlap message. In order to do that, I need to set it as movable. So that was when I tried to simulate and move it, like this, is not moving. And if I stop, I get this error. And the error, if we open that, is telling us what to do, right? So let's see. Has to be movable if you'd like to move. So that happens to be in the transform here. This mobility setting is static. We want to set it to movable. And now if I simulate, I can move it, right? And we're actually not getting a collision message here, so that is probably fine. But if we really wanted to know, this function here, actor begin overlap, is gonna give you a name. It's gonna also output the name of the actor that overlapped it. And so if we really wanted to get like some cool debugging, we can use the format string, I think. Format text. Yeah, we can use the format text node. And what the format text node allows you to do is have these, like, you can add brackets and you can add values within those. So if that doesn't make sense, I'll show you. Format text. We might make the first list of text could be I was overlapped by, and then you can say in these curly brackets, you can do that actor. And then boom, you get this new like wildcard input. And so you can say, I was overlapped by, and then we need to convert to actor text. Yeah, sorry. So sometimes it's really smart and like, no, okay, it's what we need to do. Other times, if you just drag out here, you can try to convert it to what you know will work. In this case, it's text. So I type the word text, and then it's going to take the name of that object, and that actor is going to return some text, which I can then plug in. And then I can take this and output it. And so if you're like, what did you just do? Not following along. Basically what I did is I could have just plugged this, this other actor directly here, and it would get me the display name of that actor, and that's what I would see. In that case, instead, I've decided to format like a message that's a little more human readable by using the format text node. So now if I play this, be sure to switch this back. I was overlapped by, and then you see, well, BP underscore player character 5, which happens to be, you know, what the actor is called in this instance, right? So that's pretty helpful, maybe. Okay. So let's delete this. I mean, we know our overlap is working. So what do we want to do next? So I think next, well, we are going to want to do the following. We're going to want to say, well, you've collided with this. We want to add 1 to your score. We want to, you know, increase your mass, which is going to affect, you know, how you're able to move and how you're able to jump now that we have this character. But before we do that, it's important to know, like, where do we want to put these, where do we want to store all this stuff? Because does it make sense, really, in our world, to have that all kind of stored by this actor? Or, because it seems like kind of not the right way to do a design, right? Because then we're going to have a bunch of stuff inside of that actor, and we're going to have a bunch of stuff inside of the enemy, and a bunch of other stuff inside the player. So in the next video, what I'm going to talk about is kind of how do we design a pretty robust kind of state system, a system to manage all this state and to also kind of manage like what's being, you know, communicated. And in our case, you know, it definitely makes sense when it's overlapped. If it's overlapped by the player, then we can do the following, which is called destroy. So we can destroy the actor, which is, we'll do some other things, of course. We'll have the actor say, I was hit, and do the things it needs to do, but it's going to communicate centrally, if that makes any sense. It's not going to do all of this stuff by itself, because it ends up being a ton of extra work. And it'll work, but it'll be really hard for other people to follow along with what you're doing. So the last node I added was this destroy actor node. Now if I play this and I run into it, it's gone, right? Because that's what destroy actor does. And if we go to our pickups, we can add a few more of these in the level. I'm holding Alt. Maybe we add like 3 of them, and then we can go ahead and, you know, pick them up, see if it's hard to jump over them, etc. Right? So that's kind of where I want to stop. And in the next video, like I said, we're going to set up our gameplay systems. Great.